Look at the flight times for May of 2015. You'll see that the flight times are identical, which actually matches my real-world experience when flying from Florida to Texas and back. The two flights were indeed identical in duration, in reality, and I was totally confounded, even as a 10-year-old child, as to how this is even possible if the ground is spinning east about 800 miles per hour at that latitude. Just think about this for a minute. In order for the flights to be identical in duration, the world must be stationary. This has nothing to do with the atmosphere spinning. Airplanes are aerodynamic and compelled through the air by their own propulsion, which amounts to several jet engines attached to the plane. If you actually think that jet airplanes are strictly at the mercy of the winds and their independent propulsion cannot help them break free of their apparent eastward velocity prior to takeoff, you obviously haven't thought this through, and you're simply making excuses for the spinning globe Earth, which doesn't exist in reality. For one thing, airplanes traveling west will experience headwinds or tailwinds depending on the weather conditions. Eastbound flights will also experience headwinds or tailwinds depending on the weather conditions during the flight. In order for your hypothesis to work, then westbound flights would always experience immense, almost insurmountable headwinds. This just isn't true. It doesn't occur in reality. Eastbound flights would always enjoy a major tailwind, and that also isn't true in reality. In order for someone to justify the two flights being identical in duration, they must cast aside all common sense and physical laws. The simple fact is, if the planes are fixed to a common rotational frame of reference prior to takeoff, the law of physics known as the Coriolis effect must be rejected as false to maintain a spinning globe Earth model. Unfortunately, anyone can demonstrate the Coriolis effect, which is a law of physics related to rotating bodies as a fixed frame of reference. The Coriolis effect is not the cause of the opposite rotation of cyclones, but rather a simple principle of fluid dynamics where the sun acts as sort of an oar, disturbing or perturbing a liquid. The sun's stirring up the atmosphere, and the atmosphere reacts to this perturbation in opposite directions depending on the relative location to the path of the sun. Since the dividing line between typhoons and hurricanes is not fixed to the equator, then the Coriolis effect is no longer a valid explanation of this phenomenon. But the Coriolis effect is definitely a characteristic of a rotating body. The airline flights having identical duration is complete, irrefutable proof that the world is not spinning. With or without the atmosphere spinning, planes are designed to cut through atmosphere, especially with the advances in aerodynamics and jet propulsion. So now that I've made this video, please stop commenting on these three spinning globe arguments which have been conclusively debunked. The Earth isn't spinning. It's not a globe. East to west flight times prove this conclusively, whether you like it or understand it or not. You must at least consider the world as a stationary plane, just for, hypothetical, just for argument's sake, to see whether this is true. If you always consider the Earth as a spinning globe and fail to consider the Earth as anything but that, no matter what, no amount of evidence will register with you because you're totally brainwashed by illogical assertions of people who are incapable of seeing the plain, simple truth for what it is. The final point to make in regards to airline flights is the fact that pilots maintain a level flight in order to maintain a consistent altitude. If the Earth was actually a globe, a pilot would need to angle their nose down in order to maintain a consistent altitude. Technically, an airplane wouldn't even really need to ascend in order to gain altitude. All they'd need to do is fly level. By flying level, the path of travel would be a tangent to the curved ground below. If you observe a helicopter make a perfectly vertical ascent, or a rocket for that matter, such vertical flights remain fixed to the position below if they travel straight up vertically. In all actuality, if you travel straight up, you would necessarily begin to slip out of that eastward frame of reference of the ground below, simply because you would be traveling across a greater arc as you gain altitude, so the arc would be greater than that of the spinning ground. Any object thrown upwards from a moving body would apparently head backwards as it gains altitude and would head very swiftly backwards at immense speeds on their way back down. This principle can be demonstrated with without a rotational frame of reference. If you take a ball and toss it pretty high into the air, it will obviously come straight back down to you. However, if you're in motion, if you toss the ball upward, it will keep its forward momentum only up to the point where it starts to head back down, where it will lose all of its forward momentum and head straight back down, straight towards the ground, but from your moving frame of reference, it'll appear to head backwards. This shows that objects, when compelled high into the air, will maintain their forward momentum only to the point to where they reach the peak of their trajectory, at which point any forward momentum will be lost and they will just simply fall straight down. Since you continue moving forward, the ball will land behind you and will absolutely not continue their forward momentum on the way down. This is a demonstration that proves the flights would not maintain their eastward momentum, especially since they are propelled through the air with several jet engines. Imagine if the tennis ball in this experiment had jet engines attached that would propel them backwards from my course of travel. The ball would land even further behind me in that case. Globularists will maintain that the airplanes will keep their eastward velocity along with the face of the Earth when they're not connected to the ground, and they have engines propelling them in the opposite direction as the rate of travel in the face of the Earth, and they're gaining altitude, which means they would be traveling across a greater arc. When you take the time to actually consider the scientific data, the flights being identical in duration totally disproves the notion that the Earth is traveling at any rate whatsoever, let alone faster than the speed of sound near the equator. The identical flight times prove the world as stationary. If you can demonstrate the contrary, please do so. But to assert that I'm wrong without offering an explanation or demonstration or proof other than the three arguments I've just totally debunked, then please keep it to yourself because you do not have a viable position in this argument. Thank you.